is a wildlife warrior, a renowned wildlife filmmaker, conservationist, and cultural anthropologist. In a life akin to the wild thornberries, Saba Douglas-Hamilton was raised in East Africa among elephants, where she developed a deep passion for wildlife, fighting against the illegal ivory trade with her parents. She has hosted acclaimed BBC series including This Wildlife and Secret Life of Elephants, and as an ambassador for Save the Elephants and chair of the Future for Nature Awards Committee, she works at the intersection of conservation, tourism and indigenous communities in Kenya. I met up with her while at the Gaul Literary Festival. The story goes that you were baptized by the breath of an elephant. What was it like to grow up among elephants in East Africa?
It's true, I was baptized by the breath of an elephant. That was my first ever encounter with a wild elephant. And she was somebody who my parents had got to know over the course of the years that they were doing their original pioneering study in Lake Manyara in Tanzania. And so she came up, my mother, when I was born, she actually walked me out to this elephant and presented me to her. Remember, this was a completely wild elephant, but she knew them and she trusted them. So she came forward and she sniffed me from head to toe, and there must have been a great big whoosh of elephant breath all over me. And so that's how I like to look at it. But I think growing up with elephants, you know, you get this real sort of appreciation of this magnificent alien intelligence. And not just in elephants, but I personally feel that the wild world is full of consciousness and intelligence and extraordinary things, senses and ways of seeing the world and feeling the world that we have absolutely no idea about. And so I guess that it just developed a very profound love in my heart for wild things, and it's watching also then what happened to the elephants over the years. You know, how they were battered by ivory poaching and how difficult life is now with sort of increasing conflict with people and the issues they're facing with climate change. You know, I am forever forged as somebody who's going to fight for the wild world. I think that's what happens when you're brought up with it.
So how did your experiences with these gentle giants shape the way you actually view the world and also your work?
The main thing was probably the way my father taught me how to interact with elephants. He was very unusual in his time because at that stage, most people had an antagonistic relationship with wildlife. They were shooting it or it was affecting them personally. But he came in to observe. He was a witness. He was there simply to sit very quietly and watch their behavior. And that was the way that we were brought up to interact with wildlife. So whenever they felt threatened, you just crouched down, made yourself small, stopped any kind of noise, and just allowed them to relax and get on with their lives. And so, yeah, I think there's a gentleness in how one engages with nature that then suddenly allows it to open up and show you all sorts of secrets. And I think, you know, in my life, I've sort of taken several different courses. I've been very interested also in the culture of people. You know, in Africa, in Kenya, we have 43 different tribes, each with their own language and culture. So that's been a fascinating place to grow up to. But really, it's always been about this amazing abundance of life that we have around us, biodiversity.
So you fought against the illegal ivory trade with your parents. What insights have you received about human nature when you've done these encounters?
I wish that we were a bit more like bonobos, but I fear that we're much more like chimpanzees. And chimpanzees are wonderful, extraordinary, intelligent creatures, but they also have some of the worst traits that people have. They murder, they cannibalize, they rape, they do all of these things. They're voracious, you know, they're very effective hunters. They kill other monkeys and they devour them, rip them to pieces and devour them. I suppose I always hope that one can appeal to the better side of people, which is empathy, compassion, rather than people being moved towards their more basic urges. And what does worry me very much about the state of the world now, with this rogue capitalism that has been let loose upon the world, is it does seem to bring the worst side of human nature to the forefront. And I do think we need to pull back from the edge quite rapidly and try to find unity in our diversity and pull together and really, you know, create the kind of future that we want to live in, because right now it's looking pretty bleak.
Saba, are there any particular elephant behavior stories memories that you can think of that have profoundly impacted you?
I'd always wondered what would happen if you were in the path of an elephant and you made yourself very small and very unthreatening, and what it would do when it came up to you. And quite by chance, this happened to me one day when I was in Namibia in the desert, and I had been working on some films with the BBC, and they have these wonderful sand rivers there that flow only occasionally during the year. So I'd been sleeping out on my own in the middle of this sand river, and this one night, and I'd been trying to persuade various people from the film crew to come and join me and sleep under the stars, and none of them wanted to. So I just went to do it on my own, and I was lying there, sort of falling in, coming in and out of sleep, and I could hear these elephants slightly upriver eating the trees, and so I was thinking about them and dreaming about them, and then all of a sudden I came wide awake, and I looked around, and there in the moonlight was this huge bull elephant walking along the riverbank, just about 50 meters away from me. And so I rolled over onto my stomach and I looked at him and I thought, my goodness, this is exactly what I was hoping to see. This is why I do this and why I like to sleep out in nature. And then he stopped and he kind of looked out at me and he saw this black rectangle of my mattress on the silvery sand. And he decided, this was very unusual, he had to come and investigate. So he started walking towards me, and I was lying there on the ground, and I looked around, and there was nowhere that I could run. There was thick sand. The camp where everybody else was far away, and there were just these little scrubby bushes around that offered absolutely no protection. And so I realized with a sinking heart that I had only one option, which was to lie there and to play dead and hope to God that he wasn't going to do anything to me. So he came closer and closer and closer and loomed above me, and completely blocking out the moon. And I thought, this is it, I'm finished. This is my last few seconds on earth. And he stopped. And then he just reached out his trunk, just like that original elephant did. And he smelled me from head to toe. And he curled up his trunk. And he stood there for a long while, just thinking. And then he just walked away. And I thought I was going to explode with fear and adrenaline and ecstasy and such humility, because I had been spared by the grace of an elephant.
Sri Lanka has a massive human-elephant conflict, and I don't think it's anything different to what other developing countries mainly have. How do you balance conservation efforts with the needs of local communities?
The most important thing is proper landscape planning. You know, we all talk about long-term sustainability, but we don't really do enough to get there. And the point about wild animals is that they don't need all the space. They just need corridors that can move them from one critical area to another. And they don't have to be very wide, but they have to allow them to move through people safely. And so a lot of it comes down to having the courage to maybe buy up some farms, create corridors, and as soon as you do that, you start to remove the problems of conflict. So we are humans. Our main focus is humanity, the happiness and the well-being of humanity and the prosperity of humanity. But if we destroy our biodiversity, then we're destroying the fabric of life that we depend upon. And elephants are an important part of that, especially, I would imagine, here. I don't know very much about them, but I'm sure that there's some of the key seed dispersers that you have in your forests, and they're part of what propagate your forests here. That's certainly the case in Africa.
Saba, with climate change being taken seriously, but sometimes I think not so seriously, not seriously enough. What do you think the future will hold for the wild?
If we continue as we are right now, and we don't rein in these drivers of climate change, then it's hard to predict what's going to happen. But I would imagine, you know, like dealing with extreme temperatures, we're going to see mass extinction, probably including of large swathes of humanity. And there's going to be, you know, very big change in how the balance of ecosystems. But in the long term, especially if humanity is reduced right down to negligible amounts, what we'll find probably is that, you know, in several 100,000 years, things will come back, or there'll be whole new life forms that evolve. So, you know, I think, I hope what we don't do is turn the planet into a desert, because then there is very little hope for life.
So along these lines, if we flip the coin, what emerging conservation initiatives or trends give you hope for the future?
I love concepts like half Earth, for example, which was an idea that was proposed by E.O. Wilson, that wonderful American biological thinker. And you know, this idea that for us to have an optimal environment, we need to set aside at least half of the Earth for nature. And there's, you know, it is picking up pace, this movement. So I do find that very exciting. I also think that there's a lot to be said for people eating less meat, especially in developed countries like America, where the production of meat is industrial. And so I think that, you know, I do really believe in the power of the individual. And I think that each one of us making small change become a powerful force for change when we're united. And that really would be my final message, is just that if every single one of us does one thing every day to try to make the world a better place, we're going to start moving in the right direction.
Well, Saba, thank you so much. I just hope things will turn out for the better, or that nature will actually decide that it's time for us to move on. Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. Remember to subscribe, follow and like us for more.